Welcome to the Rainy Day Rabbit Holes podcast, your escape from the mundane.
Dive into the rich history of the Pacific Northwest with us and let your mind wander down the rabbit hole.
Because in the Northwest, it's always raining something weird. I am Shea.
And I'm Jody. Let's fall down the rabbit hole.
Caitlyn.
Yes.
Yeah, that's you. When I say the words free love, what comes to mind for you?
Oh, definitely hippies. Peace signs.
Yeah, like...
Paisley.
Right. Flower power.
Yeah.
The 1960s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Locking it in.
Charles Manson, maybe?
Oh.
Well, I mean, Charlie's never far from our minds as true crime girls, right? He's always with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I might just blow your mind a little bit today with a tale of free love, feminism, and strong women in the 60s. But here's the twist. It's the 1860s.
Oh, shit.
That's the time that Jody and I love to hang out in the best, is the 1800s in the Pacific Northwest.
It was wild.
It was wild here. It's so good. Well, rabbit holders, you might have already noticed something different today. You can finally tell the hosts' voices apart.
There you go.
That's because today we have a very special guest. It's only Caitlyn from the PNW Haunts and Homicides podcast. Welcome, Caitlyn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah.
So Caitlyn and Cassie are the dynamic duo who host PNW Haunts and Homicides. It's a Pacific Northwest paranormal and true crime podcast, and they are part of our Umbrella Podcast Collective.
Yes, we are. Wow. Can you come and do like our intro on our show?
Sure, anytime.
Great.
So tell my listeners a little bit about your show and where they can find you.
Oh my gosh. Can I really top that? Can I add anything to that? We're on all of the things. We're on all of the socials and basically all of the major streaming platforms for podcasts that I can think of. We always tell people if there's one that you know of that we're not on, let us know, I guess. Something really obscure that is your preferred.
Tin can podcast player.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it would have to be.
But they can always go to your website to find links to everything, right?
It's true. Yeah, we have a link tree and a website.
And it's PNW-hauntsandhomicides.com, right?
It is. Yeah, we snagged her.
Well, and if you ever can't remember that, guys, you can always go to our website, rainydayrabbitholes.com/umbrella. And that's where you can find links to all of the podcasts under our umbrella, like PNW Haunts and Homicides. So definitely give them a listen. All right. So Caitlyn, today is kind of a side quest.
Ooh.
I got sucked down this particular rabbit hole while researching last week's episode about Henry Yesler. So Henry and his wife, Sarah, had an unconventional relationship. Not only did they abstain from the traditional Christian religion, they were spiritualists, which actually had some interesting ties in with Christianity. Like a lot of Christians were spiritualists in the day. It wasn't considered to be like the devil worshiping side of things.
Right. Not counterintuitive to religion per se.
Right.
Yeah.
But they also practiced, and get ready to clutch your pearls, free love.
Oh, hoo-hoo-hoo.
Are we scandalized yet?
Oh, I'm so excited.
So for most people, free love brings up visions of flower crown wearing hippies getting freaky in the back of a VW bus, right?
Definitely.
But what was extremely surprising is that the roots of this movement can be traced all the way back to the 2nd century.
Wow.
With an obscure sect of early Christians called the Adamites. So these free-thinking dudes and dudettes from North Africa claim to have regained Adam and Eve's original innocence. So I'm assuming before they ate the fruit from the tree and figured out that for some reason naked was being bad. I don't know.
Naked is bad. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't eat apples. It's a whole thing.
Don't eat apples off of random trees because there's probably worms in them. I don't know if you've ever bit you're like, hey, there's an apple on this tree, and take a bite, and then you can see like the hole that the worm had gone through, and you're like, that's what I can think about.
I know. I'm like, that's horrifying, but also, have you guys ever heard of like street drugs? Because it gets worse.
What?
Like street drugs. You know, like,
right.
Hard drugs. I was like,
yes.
I mean, yeah, like an apple with a worm in it is bad, but like, it gets worse.
So,
like a true crime podcaster.
Right. Okay, I see where you're going. I was like, are they putting drugs in the apples nowadays? What are the kids doing these days? I mean, I have made a bong out of an apple back in my day, but that's how I can put together with the apple and the street drugs. Okay, I was not going where you were leading.
I know. You need red string, okay? I'm told it's part of my charm. I don't know.
You went straight from Adam and Eve eating apples to street drugs.
Yeah. I'm clubbing.
So the Adamites practiced their rituals in the nude, and naked time was generally widely accepted. And they rejected the concept of marriage, saying it would never have existed but for sin. So they also thought that no actions could be held as either good nor bad. So what do you think people thought of them? They were, of course, labeled as devil worshippers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's going to go over well.
No. And practices similar to the Adamites have sprung up through the centuries, from the Brethren of the Free Spirit in the 13th century to the Taborites in Bohemia in the 15th century. Free love played a powerful part in radical thinking during the English Revolution in the mid-1600s. And so you might be wondering then, what exactly is free love? How we're talking about it today.
Yeah, I want to know what you found out that it is.
Well, it's a philosophy that challenges many of what we would think of as ingrained societal norms. So it seeks freedom from state regulation and church interference in personal relationships. So basically, the core is the free union of adults, that adults of legal consenting age can enter into relationships without legal or religious recognition or regulation, and that they can come and go as they please in those relationships. That's very important to it. It's basically like you can freely be in this relationship for as long or as short as you want, and freely leave it whenever you want, and that there's no legal or religious repercussions for that.
Okay.
And it really came into sharp focus in the mid-1800s as feminism began to grow into the modern suffrage movement. So the free union term has been used since then to describe a relationship into which all parties enter, remain, and leave freely.
Makes sense.
And marriage is often viewed as a form of slavery and human ownership, especially for women and children.
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, especially back before there were any sort of legal protections for people,
right?
For people in marriages or the children. You were your husband or father's property. Yeah. To do with as he wishes. So beating your wife for a long time, not illegal. Raping your wife,
right? Not
illegal.
Yeah, that one stayed legal for a lot longer than we'd like, I think.
Yeah,
a lot longer than beating.
I think the last state to make marital rape illegal was in like the 1980s or the 1990s. Like it took that long.
That sounds...
Yeah,
that sounds accurate.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to the Pacific Northwest and Henry and Sarah Yesler. So for the Yeslers, a little love on the side weren't no big thing.
Oh.
When Sarah Yesler finally moved to Seattle to be with her husband after 7 years, and if you guys want to hear more, you got to listen to my Henry Yesler episode from last week.
Just say Yesler.
Yes. Just say Yesler to the dressler. No, that was dumb. Sorry. Yours was much better.
No, I like it. Sometimes, they can't all land.
No.
That's the thing.
They can't all be gems.
Yeah. And I've got quite a few flops. If we went through on my Riverside account, you would see like some of the faces that Cassie has made at me. Like
when Sarah Yesler finally moved to Seattle to be with her husband after 7 years, she was nonplussed to find that Henry had conceived a child with his live-in Native American housekeeper / Indian wife. That's what they called them back in.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
But it's totally cool.
Yeah, she was fine. A lot of records state that she embraced the child as her own, even though they did send the kid off to live with a foster family pretty quickly.
Oh.
So that's embracing. So she wasn't mad. But there was also a little evidence that Sarah might have been having a little fun on the side as well.
I mean, that's
fair.
their whole arrangement,
Exactly.
you know? But
yeah, for
Oh,
the
man.
late 1800s. So this is early Seattle. I'm sure it was scandalous.
yeah.
So in a letter from Sarah's good friend, Eliza Woodard, to Sarah Yesler, dated October 7th, 1860, Eliza congratulated Sarah on her success with a Mr. Meigs.
Oh.
Why, I am perfectly astonished. That's my accent for her. I don't know where she's from.
I dig it. I'm
Wow.
with it.
Why, I am perfectly astonished and delighted at your daring boldness. Walk right into the affections of a man. I hope it isn't anything bad, for I want to share in the spoils, and you know I wouldn't dare if it wasn't modest. Ha ha ha.
Oh.
Well, Sarah, I'll talk rational. You are the most bewitching little muggins I know of. If only I had hold of you, I would squeeze you for half an hour.
Yeah. You know, I'm starting to pick up on the spicy
Yeah.
that you were mentioning.
I mean, yeah, it sounds a little scandalo.
yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
No, honestly, I was just going to say, like, do I smell a throuple?
I don't know. I mean, it gets spicier, but who is this mysterious Mr. Meigs?
Good question.
Well, luckily, I have a subscription to newspapers.com and we have historylink.org. Thank you for your work, historylink.org.
Yes.
So George Anson Meigs was another Pacific Northwest titan of industry. He owned Blake Island. He built a large sawmill at Port Madison on Bainbridge Island, and he also built the very first foundry in Seattle. So it makes sense that Sarah might have been rubbing elbows with this man, given her own husband's prominence in Seattle.
Okay.
But who's to say what his relationship with Sarah really was? We can only speculate. And I like to speculate.
Let's speculate.
So, by the way, Blake Island, after G.A. Meigs stripped it of all of its profitable timber, he stopped paying his property taxes to King County. And so they had to forgive him $2,000 worth of back property taxes, which was around $76,000 today, so that they didn't have to repossess it. But then the bank that held mortgages had to foreclose on him and take possession of the island. So, you know, good job, dude.
Wow. So he's a real dick.
Yeah, you know,
He's
I'm
like
kind of finding that early founders of Seattle had something in common, and that's that they did not like to pay their debts.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. Like, who wants to pay their bills? But,
Right.
like, the rest of us do. So I'm just saying.
The rich ones didn't.
Jeez. Right. That's. Man, he walked so the Elon could run.
Right.
You know? Bezos,
Sure.
literally also from Seattle. Oh,
Right. So the most spicy, juicy, and scandalous evidence of Sarah's possible secret love life comes from two earlier letters that same year from Eliza. So Sarah would often sail down to San Francisco to take a water cure, which was just hydrotherapy. It was very, very big in the 1800s.
Okay.
And it was offered by Eliza's husband, and we will get to him later. So these letters appear to be shortly after one of Sarah's San Francisco trips and hint at a deeper and more personal relationship between the two ladies.
Ooh.
In one letter, Eliza exclaims, "Oh, Sarah, I wish to say so much and cannot say anything. I want to sleep with you again."
Wow.
Whoa.
That's the real San Francisco treat.
Good one.
Damn.
Yeah.
It just keeps getting spicier.
Yes. And here's one more. At the close of another letter, about a month later, Eliza writes, I would like to step into your bathing room tonight and take an ablution, and you might shower me too, and I would not squeal so bad. I would like to tell you how I spanked the captain last night, but I haven't time now. Sorry, I don't think that that's actually like an innuendo.
Listen, that was spicy for the time, though.
She would talk about this captain in a lot of the letters, and she did refer to spanking people a lot. Like, for some reason, in the 1800s, people really liked to spank their friends. I don't know, but
did they or did she?
When in this context, when you say, I would like to tell you how I spanked the captain last night, but haven't time now, it does sound rather filthy.
Yes, it does.
That's what I'm going to call it from now on.
Right? I'm going to go spank the captain, if you know what I mean.
Feel a little tense. I need to spank the captain.
Oh my God.
I call him Blackbeard, the captain.
Oh, man.
Okay. Okay. Jody's going to be so upset that she missed this. She loves that sort of stuff.
Who
Okay.
doesn't?
Now, this is all open to interpretation. Some authors and historians have taken these letters and their close relationship as a possible sexual one, like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But just because I want to.
Yeah, I mean, shipping them.
But others are of the opinion that we might not be taking differences in how friends spoke to each other back in the day.
I do think that was more common with female friends in particular.
Yeah, and it was common for female friends to share beds at the time.
Yes.
And because Eliza and her husband operated a water cure therapy clinic, it's very possible and not out of the question that Eliza and Sarah would have bathed together.
Makes total sense.
And not even in a sexual way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to imagine the spicier version though.
Listen, I'm just working with the information that I have being presented, and I'm saying a raise of the eyebrow to you, good sir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked a bit about the free love movement and a few characters in that story here in the Pacific Northwest. But how does this tie into the early feminist movement? But that's why we've brought Miss Eliza Woodard Hurd into our story.
Oof.
She was breaking hearts, breaking rules, and maybe breaking a few corset laces.
Oh, shit.
And while we catch our breath,
Oh,
let's hear from our sponsors. Oh.
I love it.
So welcome back. If you want ad-free episodes, bonus content, free merch, and flawless skin, because supporting us moisturizes your soul and your face, please consider subscribing to us either on Patreon or via the Spreaker Supporters Club. You can head to rainydayrabitholes.com/support for links and more information.
Excellent.
Well, I am here with Caitlyn from the PNW Haunts and Homicides podcast, and we were about to talk about how free love, feminism, and the Pacific Northwest are intertwined.
Ah, a beautiful baby.
So Eliza Woodard Hurd migrated to the Pacific Northwest via the Oregon Trail with her family in the summer of 1852, when Eliza was just 18 years old. I mean, actually, I say just, but at that point, 18 years old, like you are...
She's practically an old maid.
Right.
Yeah.
And by early 1853, they had settled in Olympia, Washington. She married James Hurd in 1855, a respected market owner in Olympia, who had one of the largest meat packing businesses in the area.
Well, hello.
And that's not an innuendo to anything else. They just packed meat, unfortunately.
I mean...
I was really hoping we could go somewhere with that one.
Hey, Liz, we can take this wherever we want.
That's right. I'm sure there was some meat packing back in those days.
Right? He's like an old-timey Mr. Big.
He had meat packers working for him as far away as eastern Washington. He also employed someone you might have heard of, Nisqually Chief Shea.
Okay.
Well,
I'm not sure if I can totally place it, but it sounds very, very familiar.
Well, Leschi is a community in Seattle named after this chief. He was pretty well known in the early founding of Seattle, and he was accused of murder in 1857. And James Hurd testified in Leschi's defense during this murder trial.
Interesting.
And that's all we'll say about Leschi. I'll save that for another episode.
Okay.
So unfortunately, James was attacked by a wild ox and killed in 1857, leaving behind his wife and infant child.
God damn.
Yeah. The heartbroken Eliza turned to spiritualism to cope with her grief. She believed that she was able to contact her husband's spirit and took comfort from it. In a letter to Sarah, she writes, "He lives, I know it, because I feel it permeate my entire being. And if he lives, he still loves me and is cognizant of my thoughts, aspirations, and whereabouts. Ah, peaceful thought, what comfort it brings to my yearning soul." Oh, yeah, I know. I'm like a little teary. She was a beautiful writer. After her husband died, she wrote this full-page poem about her grief to Sarah that, like, I would not be able to read it on this podcast because I would just bawl like a little baby.
You would just cry.
Yeah. So she actually was a beautiful writer. In 1851, while visiting family in Santa Cruz, California, she developed connections in the spiritualist community. From then on, she regularly communicated with the spirit world, took water cures, and adhered to a vegetarian diet, which was big with that community back then.
Yeah. And you know what? They had me and then they lost me. And
well, I thought at first you said they had meat and then they lost meat. And I was like, well, that's a weird way to refer to her husband.
Oh, no. Oh, God. Yeah, that works in multiple ways. Oh, no.
Her circle of spiritualist friends became very important to her, and she would often travel from Olympia to San Francisco to visit. In the same letter to Sarah, she writes, "We will indeed try to be harmonious and happy, thereby be enabled to communicate with the unseen world. I fear my advantages for being developed as a medium will be very limited. My friends here in the ABC of the beautiful philosophy of spiritualism." So it sounds like she was maybe wanting to be a medium. She did speak several times about doing seances where there was table tapping and some clairvoyance sleep. I'm not sure what that is.
Neither am I, to be honest.
So she was definitely involved in the spiritualist community, which, interestingly enough, the spiritualist community had a lot of women's suffrage in it because it was something, and that was what I was going to get into further in here before I ran out of time.
Yeah.
So I'll just touch briefly on it here. So spiritualism was important in the women's suffrage movement because a lot of women were mediums and would work in giving seances and that sort of thing. And so it gave women a way to have some income and some power.
Right.
And so that was one of the big reasons why a lot of suffragists would do that. Now, unfortunately, a lot of women were still being taken advantage of by men in that and I'm saying by
absolutely
fathers and husbands, basically like spiritualists pimping out their wives and children to do this. Like Victoria Woodhull, that's how she started. Her dad was forcing her, and well, not forcing, they liked to do it, but he would starve them so that they would look more waify, and have them go hold seances and fully helped them grift people through this.
Wow. You'd have to starve me for me to look wafy.
Yeah. My waif days are far behind me, like 40 years behind me.
Wafy? I never knew her.
So early in 1860, a man by the name of Charles Henry DeWolfe was a popular lecturer in San Francisco, holding forth about the wonders of phrenology and accompanying sciences. If you're not familiar, phrenology is the pseudoscience that involves measuring the skull's bumps to predict a person's mental traits and personality. It's very popular in the 19th century, and it was also quite racist.
Yes, I was going to say, that old gem.
Yes.
Yikes.
And Charles Henry fancied himself a doctor of this science.
Oh, excellent.
Now, of course, back in those days, it was pretty easy to call yourself a doctor without any credentials.
I was going to say, you know what? I've always felt like, I should just self-nominate,
Well,
Just-
people can check on things nowadays.
Yeah.
They didn't have Google back then to look up your credentials. And also, given that phrenology isn't actually a science, you can feel
Right.
free to make up whatever crap you want about it and call yourself a doctor of it. And people will, as long as you got confidence, man, you can do it.
I mean, it's that charisma.
Exactly.
It's classic cult leader stuff here.
That's why I say I could always be a cult leader. Oh, maybe I could be a doctor too of some made up
Dr.
BS.
Cult Leader. It kind of sounds like, when you're a kid and you're like, I want to be like, actually, I was listening to another show where they were talking about he wanted to be a lawyer / wrestler. So he would be a daytime wrestler and nighttime lawyer. So always seeking justice. It sounds like that, kind of like a superhero by day,
Yeah, I don't
Like
think this
a
guy was a
doctor-
superhero in any way.
No. Only if it was you.
Oh, if it was me. I would be a doctor of essential oils because I went through a real crunchy phase
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my 30s where I was like, everything's bad for you except for essential oils and you should just put them on everything. And I got over that. I gave myself eczema because
Oh, no.
I was putting it raw on my face, like undiluted. And I got this huge abscess on the side of my cheek that was literally weeping. And I was like refusing to do anything except for put more essential oil on it. And I finally was like, what am I doing? And gave up on that. Essential oils smell nice. And I think that's about all they really do. But I do know a lot about what people say they do. So I could be a doctor of essential oils. And I could actually sound like I know what I'm talking about. And people would believe me.
And you know what? Thanks to doTERRA, that really is like still Dr. Colt.
Right.
Dr. Colt MLA.
The pseudoscience is strong with these ones.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's wild. I love essential oils too. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, hey, listen though, there's not science.
Yeah. And when people say that it can cure like real diseases and then people don't seek treatment for their cancer because somebody has told them that they just need to like, I don't know, put coffee up their butt and then use essential oils and then they die. And I think that that's criminal.
It for sure. Yes. Yeah. That's
I think essential oil. I use essential oils all the time. We have a diffuser in our studio. They smell amazing. I put them in my laundry because they smell great. And I feel like essential oil smells don't give me headaches like fake smells do. And putting it in like my laundry doesn't irritate my skin like all the chemical stuff does. But they also still are chemicals, people. Like, don't fool yourself. Chemicals are just the makeup of life. Everything is a chemical. Water's a chemical.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I mean, chemical has gotten a real bad rap as a term,
but you can't live chemical free because you wouldn't be living.
I mean, you literally can't just because it's in the water.
You are chemicals.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry
okay.
about that.
I could go on and on. I could do a rant. Rant over.
Rant over.
Okay. So Charles Henry had lived in Old Town, Maine in the 1840s and 50s, and he considered himself a preacher, among other things, but more of a do what I say, not what I do kind of spiritual leader.
Great.
Because he was eventually chased out of town after a scandalous tryst with an unmarried young woman.
Fantastic.
So, yep. Good job, preacher. So he began publishing, lecturing, and organizing for reform groups across the country. Now, it didn't mention what kind, but then there was a mention that he was traveling with a free love enclave by this time. So I think it was free love reform groups or maybe marriage reform or something like that. And in 1860, his 16-year-old daughter had grown really fond of San Francisco and refused to leave, so he settled in to make a name for himself. So he traveled throughout Northern California, Oregon, and Washington giving lectures, although many towns rebuked his presence. There was a 2-page article in a newspaper, and I'm going to just
Cliff notes.
I'm just going to read like my favorite little part
Okay.
about this in this. It was in a newspaper in Salem, Oregon, stating, "Beware of the fell destroyer, this he-wolf in sheep's clothing, whose only object is to seek out victims on whom to satiate the brutal lusts of his corrupted and extremely violated carcass."
Whoa.
Tell us how you really feel, Salem, Oregon.
Seriously, don't hold back.
Dr. C.H. DeWolfe is an inflated mountebank, whatever that is, sounds bad.
Wow.
A thoroughgoing, rotten-hearted hypocrite, a miserable, low-bred, self-abandoned, and litigious profligate, and an internate libertine. I'm very scandalized, too.
Wow.
Unfit to run at large amount his own kind and utterly unworthy the appellation of a man. I didn't understand most of that, but it sounds bad.
I mean, listen, through context, I am able to establish that he is not only bad, but he is not good.
No.
No.
And it goes on further, calling him more names, speaking of his demeanor and actions, especially with some of the ladies in town, but you get the point.
I mean, I think so. I'm interested, so I'll need the link.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know. We're like, I want to know more about him. So Eliza first mentions Dr. DeWolfe in 1861 in a letter to Sarah, saying that she had received a letter from him announcing that he had arrived in Portland and would be in Olympia within 5 weeks. It is most likely that she met him on one of her trips to Santa Cruz or San Francisco. In May of 1862, Dr. DeWolfe arrived in Olympia, where he presented a public lecture on the vegetarian diet. And like we said, vegetarianism was also connected with social reform movements such as temperance and individualism. So vegetarianism was also called a plain diet. And
Oh, interesting.
it was meant to, I think, like Dr. Kellogg had a whole thing about
Right.
plain diets.
I was going to say, it sounds
Yeah.
in
Cornflakes.
in that same vein. Just like, don't eat anything that could be,
Exciting.
yes, literally the word I was looking for. Exciting. I mean, I would argue appetizing.
Right.
The
It might
Kellogg
cause you
diet.
to masturbate after all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, can't have too much excitement. You might start touching yourself. I'm like,
That's my favorite part about cornflakes is that it was made to keep people from touching themselves.
yeah. Oh, is this one a bad touch? Is the elbow okay?
I don't know. Some people are into that. You're getting too saucy. We're going to get kicked off the radio with you
I'm just-
elbow touching.
The radio?
Yeah, this is why we are not swearing on this podcast because we are on the radio.
Oh, I wish you'd told me that earlier.
You haven't said anything as far as I
haven't?
remember.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, that's
it's a nice
unusual.
job. Nice job's being temperate. You must be a vegetarian.
How dare you?
Now, we don't have much to tell us the early story of Eliza's relationship with Charles Henry. It's possible that sparks flew upon their initial meeting and their fondness for each other grew through letters. But within a few weeks of him arriving in Olympia, the conjugal alliance and matrimonial co-partnership of Dr. C.H. DeWolfe and Eliza A. Hurd was announced in the Washington Standard.
Jesus Christ, what did they have to do? Take out a half-page ad just for the title?
Practically. This started a chain of events that shocked and scandalized the Olympia community.
Excellent.
The couple were joined in their non-traditional ceremony on Tuesday, May 13th. The announcement read, "We, the undersigned, hereby announce to the world that we have contracted a conjugal alliance and entered into a matrimonial co-partnership, believing in the divine right of souls to dictate their own forms and the inspiration of Mother Nature and Father God as being above custom." That was all in caps. That's why I said it that way.
Wow.
And priestly ceremony, however long, dignified by legal enactment and Christian dictation. Those are all in capitals.
My goodness. Honestly,
I don't know what any of that meant, but
you know what?
sounds
It-
good.
It's not important. What is important is that it's not going on right now, because that is probably a cult I would join.
Right. The following Saturday evening, Eliza was, get this, riding a horse through town. Get ready to clutch your pearls again. Bloomers. I can't even.
So
the scandal.
Clearly not side saddle.
No.
No
skirt. Bloomers. Pants on a woman.
Was that illegal at that point? Because
yeah. It was illegal to dress. It was illegal to cross-dress in many places.
Wow.
So now that was not only to keep women from dressing in men's clothing, but it was also to keep down the gay community.
Well, sure.
And yeah. Now, then on Monday morning, so this was Saturday evening that Eliza was seen riding a horse. They got married on Tuesday, and then Saturday she was riding a horse in bloomers. And then on Monday morning, the couple prepared to board a steamboat to Victoria, and they were arrested. The couple appeared in front of Justice Bigelow on a charge of having attempted to unite.
I'm sorry, you said Justice Bigelow?
Bigelow. Like the tea.
Like the male gigolo?
Bigelow. Oh, sure. Let's call him that. The couple appeared in front of Justice Gigolo on a charge. I'm not a very good historian. Justice Bigelow on a charge of having attempted to unite parties in the bond of matrimony without the authority of law.
Oof.
I didn't know that was a thing. So they pleaded not guilty. And in his own defense, Charles Henry claimed to be, along with a minister of the gospel and a judge, a justice of the peace, and therefore qualified to marry himself.
Oh.
He's everything.
Okay. Man, it must be nice to just be a white man in the 1800s who can just
make up whatever stuff you want.
Honestly, it reminds me of that scene in The Office where he's like, I declare bankruptcy.
Right.
Like, oh, so you think you just say it and then it becomes the truth.
Right.
Okay.
So he then went on to berate the court, calling them sneaking, lying, peddling, begging, clerical sons of Ahab.
Oh.
Sick burn, dude.
Yeah.
And drunken justices, besotted judges. But their charges were sustained and the couple was released on bond by Eliza's father.
Oh, okay. Daddy's got you.
Yep, daddy's got you. The next day, Charles was arrested again on charges of fornication.
Oh, boy.
Again, he berated the court, stating that he would never be married by the law, that he would bow to no fawning, hypocritical, thieving priest, no drunken mercenary justice, nor corrupt judge for the senseless words, I pronounce you man and wife.
My goodness.
The judge had had enough and was too clever to be swayed by the pompous and vain man in front of him. Before he rendered his decision, Justice McGill said that he would like to ask the defendants a question that would influence his final decision. He turned to Charles Henry and asked, "Do you consent to take this woman as your wedded wife?" To which Charles replied, "I do." The judge then turned to Eliza. "Do you consent to take this man as your lawful husband?" She replied, "Yes." Then the judge replied icily, "By the power invested in me and in the presence of these witnesses, I pronounce you man and wife."
You just got married.
The cheeky judge had tricked the couple into getting married legally, thus ending the case, much to Charles Henry's rage.
Oh my God.
But what of Eliza's boldness in daring to traps about town and wearing only bloomers? Well, not only bloomers. She was fully dressed,
sure.
but no skirt over her bloomers. Whew. The Washington Standard posted an editorial chiding her for her boldness. The good people of our town were not a little shocked on Saturday evening last to witness a woman dressed in men's apparel. Further, in the exhibition referred to, she showed that she was but a weak, silly woman. Determination is sometimes mistaken for strong-mindedness.
Okay.
Rude.
Yeah.
However, Eliza's chosen apparel of pants was considered a protest inspired by women like Amelia Bloomer, an early women's rights advocate. She also advocated for dress reform, stating, "Let men be compelled to wear our dress for a while, and we should soon hear them advocating for a change."
Oh my God. A woman after my own heart. honestly.
Mm-hmm. So Eliza and her new husband moved to Victoria and established a bathhouse and water cure clinic. The couple continued to make waves and bring criticism down on their heads. In June of 1863, the comedian John Wood passed away under the care of the erstwhile doctor, apparently from an overdose of lobelia, a poisonous plant that was sometimes used in 19th century cures, but had been pretty much discontinued in the medical establishment at this point.
And I think we know why.
Yeah. DeWolfe had many professional claims without the bona fides to back them up. He was unable to provide a diploma for the jury, and other physicians testified that his treatment was unusual and improper. DeWolfe was true to form, sarcastic and belligerent during his trial. He claimed that Mr. Wood was responsible for his own death, as he was not honest with how much alcohol he regularly consumed. So it was his fault.
Wow. I'm feeling very attacked right now. I'm going to go ahead and just take a little sippy sip, helps the medicine go down.
I need a little liquid courage. So at this point, it seemed prudent for the couple to get out of Dodge. They relocated to the Bay Area in 1865. Dr. DeWolfe was still lecturing, now along with phrenology, dress reform, marriage, and divorce. And his wife and daughter Ella began to assist him in these lectures. Eliza became more and more involved in the growing women's suffrage movement. In 1863, San Francisco outlawed cross-dressing. Eliza ramped up her dress reform lectures.
Yeah.
And then in 1866, she began publicly demonstrating while wearing bloomers. She strolled down the streets of San Francisco boldly wearing what was considered men's attire and was later arrested. These public demonstrations were soon local gossip, and regional newspapers as far away as Olympia were reporting on the scandal. Eliza was not deterred. Love this woman.
I know. Good for her.
Dress reform was an integral part of 19th century women's suffrages.
Mm-hmm.
The bloomer movement was sparked by the October 1849 issue of the Water Cure Journal, which is interesting because her and her husband had a water cure clinic.
Yeah.
So they must have gotten that journal, urging women to develop a healthier style of dress that represented unrestricted movement.
Yes.
So styles at the time included heavy floor-length skirts, multiple layers of stiff and starched petticoats that would have either horsehair or straw woven into the bottom.
Ugh.
And, of course, whalebone corsets.
Good God.
By the early 1850s, women began sporting versions of the Turkish dress. Throughout the country, a shorter skirt worn over bloomers. This clear challenge to the established gender roles and power structures threatened men everywhere.
Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh!
These uppity women.
Her ankles.
We can see her legs, kind of, sort of.
All the humanity.
Bloomers became a symbol of women's rights. Even Susan B. Anthony adopted the new form of dress, calling it the freedom dress. Eliza continued to wear her bloomers and became more and more involved with the women's suffrage movement. She was inspired by women like Susan B. Anthony and Victoria Woodhull, who was also the first woman to run for president.
Wow.
And I think we're going to have to do a little bonus episode on her. So she ran for president well before women even had the right to vote. She was arrested for voting for herself, too.
Oh, that's amazing.
The DeWolfes moved to San Diego, where Eliza became an officer for the San Diego Suffrage Society. Charles Henry passed from a stroke in 1869, but Eliza continued her work. In 1872, she addressed the California judicial community with a party of delegates from the California Suffrage Society. She moved back to Santa Cruz in the 1870s to be closer to her family and operated a bookstore there in the 1870s and 80s and still worked in the women's suffrage movement. Unfortunately, she passed away in 1908, 3 years before women achieved the right to vote in California. The road to suffrage in the Pacific Northwest was a long and arduous journey. Arthur Denny attempted to give white women the vote in 1854 but failed. Susan B. Anthony toured the region in 1871, but was met with critics who felt that giving the vote to women would undermine their domestic supremacy and moral values.
Yeah.
Wow. You're going to be too busy voting to clean the house.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm just so sad that all I have is the 2 middle fingers,
I know. I thought only I could flip you off with my toe, too.
I could train.
Yeah, exactly. But despite these challenges, Washington became the third territory in the United States to approve women's suffrage in 1883. For a few glorious years, women were able to have their voices heard through their ballots. Unfortunately, the powerful saloon lobby pressured the courts to find the suffrage law unconstitutional, and they lost it in 1887. The women went back to work, and the state constitution was amended to guarantee women's suffrage in 1910. The 19th Amendment was passed in the United States in 1920, a step on the path towards equal rights and full participation in all aspects of life. Now, I love the story of Eliza Woodard DeWolfe because it gives us a peek into the life of an unconventional and extraordinary woman. She was fiercely individual to the end of her life. She paints a picture of what early women's suffrage looked like in the Pacific Northwest, and her fearlessness and unapologetic way she lived her life should be an inspiration to all women, despite her maybe poor taste in men.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, a lot of great women that have horrific taste in men and other things.
But he also was a champion of women's rights and dress reform and women's suffrage, so he wasn't all bad.
And that's your right to choose terrible men.
And she believed in free love, that it was her right to choose this terrible man.
I mean, you do you, boo.
Yep. I hope we can celebrate more Pacific Northwest women like her in the future. And I want to thank Bethany K. Matthews, whose 2 Zines on Eliza Woodard Hurd were basically all of my resources for this episode, because there's nothing else out there about her. So thank you, Bethany. And thank you to my wonderful guest, Caitlyn, for joining me on this ride. I appreciate you being here.
Oh my goodness. This was such a blast. No, thank you for having me.
You're an excellent guest. And I really do hope that I can have you back again, because this was really fun. You're going to have to be my pitch hitter for the future.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to talk about the first lady who ran for president and then got arrested, if I don't get a call, I'm going to be really upset. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And listeners, remember you can go to PNW Haunts and Homicides.com to find links to their show. And again, you can always find those links and links to all the other Umbrella Podcast Collective members at rainydayrabitholes.com/umbrella. Make sure to go listen to PNW Haunts and Homicides, and make sure you give them a good review on Apple Podcasts, and you can give them a 5-star review on Spotify. We'll have you on again, because this was a delight. So everyone, if you want to hear more of Caitlyn, if you listen to their podcast, and then also tell me if you want to hear more of Caitlyn on our podcast.
Yeah. And please tell her that you do.
Thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
See you down the rabbit hole.
There is a statue of the Mothman in Point Pleasant in a yearly festival celebrating the creature and the town. Here's what you've missed on the latest episode of Rev's Geek Out. In the middle of this town is a giant metal sculpture of the Mothman, who looks absolutely freaky.
Is that like some 6-pack abs there I see?
Yeah, he's got a full-on 6-pack. It looks like he's wearing wrestling trunks, too, to be perfectly honest with me.
It does. And then does he have like duck feet? He's got beautiful butterfly wings that are torn. Is that chest hair?
It really looks like either chest hair or moth on the moth.
But he's got some like very sculpted pecs.
Yeah.
And like a crazy 6-pack.
It is absolutely ridiculous. Check out this episode and more for free on the Rev and Fuego Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Rev and Fuego.